A girl is reborn as the villain in the world of her favorite dating simulator. Determined to become the best villain, she finds that the worse she behaves, the more the protagonist falls in love with her. The main character introduces us to Alicia, the villain of her favorite video game, who is ridiculing a girl for being a commoner. Despite Alicia's cruelty, the protagonist always empathized with her, admiring her strength. Unlike the protagonist of the game, who cannot comprehend how a commoner was accepted into a magic academy for nobles, Alicia despises the girl's smile and her behavior around the prince, considering her a fake. All of Alicia's friends dream of being her in order to get close to him, but the protagonist would much rather be reborn as the villain. She wakes up as a young 7-year-old Alicia. She rushes to see herself in the mirror, remembering that she is the eldest daughter of the noble Williams family. She also recalls that her brothers are romantic interests in the game. Her dream has come true. She has been reborn as the villain, and is determined to be the best villain in history. Alicia runs through the grand mansion's halls, greeting her mother, who is discussing flowers with a maid. Both are surprised by her newfound attitude. Alicia thinks that if she wants to achieve her goals, she must become more disciplined. Looking out the window, she sees her brothers practicing fencing. She rushes down and asks her brother Albert to teach her how to use a sword, claiming she wants to become stronger. Albert is skeptical, and Henry agrees it's a lie. The third brother, Alan, also thinks she's hiding something. Nonetheless, Albert agrees to teach her, but first, she must build her strength. He asks her to do 50 push-ups and 100 sit-ups every day for a week. If she succeeds, he'll teach her whatever she wants. Alicia eagerly accepts. She decides to start training in the afternoon and use the mornings to learn magic, as magic exists in this world, and only nobles like her can wield it. There are various magical attributes: darkness, fire, light, wind, and water. Nobles who master these 5 attributes belong to the 5 great families that serve the king and are pillars of the kingdom. The Williams family are experts in the darkness attribute. Alicia searches the entire library for a magic book but finds none. She gives up and decides to read a book about plants instead, knowing one cannot live on magic alone. Alicia spends the day in the library learning about different magical and healing plants. That evening, she starts her exercises. After 50 push-ups, she needs a break. She realizes Alicia is very weak, but doesn't give up and begins her sit-ups. The next day, she completes her workout and notices that it's getting easier. After breakfast, she returns to the library to continue reading. Over the next 7 days, she increases her workout repetitions and reads an enormous number of books. Her progress is astonishing. At the dinner table, she thinks she can now do 300 push-ups and 500 sit-ups, confident her brother will have no excuses left. Her family looks at her strangely, and her father asks what's been going on since she's been waking up early. Albert asks what she does all day, considering she used to laze around her room. Alicia responds that she feels fine and that her activities are a secret. She finds this amusing, feeling mysterious like a real villain. Besides, she knows they wouldn't believe her if she told them she remembers her past life. The conversation shifts as Albert announces that his friend Paul will take him to see the Magic Academy. Their father is excited because his 12-year-old son will start his studies there in just 3 years. Upon hearing this, Alicia realizes she won't be able to train with the sword until Albert returns from school. She goes back to the library until 2 in the afternoon. Stepping into the garden, she meets the various romantic interests from the game's roots. There's Eric from the Hudson family, who masters fire magic, Finn from the Smith family, who wields light magic, Gale from the Evans family, who uses wind magic, and Curtis from the Kenwood family, who uses green magic but isn't part of any of the 5 great families. Finally, there's the king's son, Prince Duke Seeker, who uses water magic and is the main love interest of the game's protagonist. Alicia admits to herself that she likes him the most, but decides that love is a protagonist's domain. This is her moment to take her first step as the villain of the story. Albert introduces his little sister to his friends. They all find her very cute. Knowing that a villain must have manners, Alicia introduces herself politely. Everyone notices that she's not at all like Albert described. She's sweet and well-mannered. Duke pays no attention to her, asking Albert if he's going to show his sword skills. Albert agrees. Alicia asks if she can join, assuring them she's done her exercises every day as promised. As Albert and Alan prepare to start, Alicia feels annoyed that they aren't taking her seriously. In a burst of determination, she snatches Albert's sword, kicks a nearby tree, and slices an apple in half with agility as it falls. Seeing this, Albert realizes that his sister has indeed trained as he asked, so he agrees to let her join. Excited, Alicia rushes off to change while the prince observes the clean slice she made on the fruit in surprise. A year has passed since Alicia's rebirth, and Albert continues to train her, focusing solely on swordsmanship. He believes there's little sense in teaching her more if she can't handle wielding the sword for long. During this year, Prince Duke has been visiting regularly. One day, while taking a break from practice, he approaches Alicia for the first time and asks why she's practicing fencing. She's about to confess that she wants to be a villain, but quickly realizes her mistake. Instead, she says she wants to gain the strength to protect a village. The prince encourages her, saying he hopes she achieves that dream, and pats her gently on the head. Albert interrupts their moment, handing Duke a book and questioning why he visits so often, suggesting it's more than just a love for literature. Duke shrugs, admitting he honestly doesn't know. Meanwhile, in the castle, the 5 noble families meet with the king to discuss the dire situation in the town of Loana, which is experiencing extreme decline. They dismiss it as a den of criminals, deciding instead to focus on the Golden Rose, believing the kingdom needs a symbol of hope. As they drink tea, the father of the Smith family tells Alicia's father that his son, Finn, invited Alicia to their house. Alicia's father nods, aware of the invitation, and reminds the others to keep in mind that his daughter has been extremely well-mannered lately. They recall that she was once selfish, but a year ago, she changed and now spends all her time in the library. Alicia and her brothers arrive at the Smith's house, where Finn greets them. A servant informs Albert that the king will be visiting that day. In the living room, Alicia spots a map on the center table, recalling that at the end of the game, her character is exiled to a foreign country. She wonders if her game has already ended. The king enters the room, and Alicia, confused, limits herself to politely greeting him. The king mentions that he has heard much about her and wanted to speak with her. He asks what she thinks about the kingdom's current state. Alicia is puzzled by such a complex question directed at an 8-year-old girl. Assuming it's a test of villainy, she seizes the opportunity. She replies that while the kingdom is a great power, it is not a good one, as most of the wealth lies in the hands of the nobles. The proof, she argues, is the starvation in Loana and the growing discontent among the people. The king asks how she thinks they should boost the economy to prevent this crisis. As a cunning villain, she proposes leveraging the mines of neighboring Calvera. The king notes that the land belongs to the Laval government and questions if she thinks it wise to take it from them. Alicia replies that it wouldn't be wise. Instead, the best solution would be to fund their independence. This way, they could avoid conflict with Laval and establish trade with Calvera, who would owe them a debt of gratitude for their assistance. The king nods, grasping her proposal. Proud of her plan, Alicia realizes that exploiting others for personal gain is something the game's protagonist would never do. The king stands, expressing that it was a pleasure talking with her. Everyone bows as he takes his leave. Duke, curious, asks if she was nervous. She assures him she wasn't, all the while realizing how handsome he truly is. The king mentions to Smith that their conversation was very interesting, and Smith concurs, revealing they have discovered the Golden Rose. During tea, Alicia indulges in her favorite sweets, savoring them adorably. The prince watches her with a smile, a stark contrast to the cold demeanor he once held as the Ice Prince. Before departing, Duke presents Alicia with a belated birthday gift, a necklace adorned with a large diamond. He bids her goodbye, leaving her in awe of the exquisite present. She knows that diamonds in this world are even more precious than in her previous life. At the palace, the king and the noble families watch as the Golden Rose blooms and shines. The king is astonished, convinced that they've found what they've been searching for, and asks who the owner is. They inform him it belongs to a baker, who kept it because it bloomed when his daughter was born. This means his daughter is destined to rule and lead the kingdom to prosperity, much like the blue rose before it. The king agrees that his son, who made the blue rose bloom, along with the saint who brought forth the golden rose, will rule together to ensure the kingdom's future. However, he knows they must first endure dark and difficult times. Back at home, Alicia completes 1,000 squats, envisioning the day she meets the protagonist. When the protagonist asks her to give up the prince, she vows to refuse right to her face, embodying the true essence of a villain. Under the full moon's glow, Prince Duke sits reading a book when he senses a presence nearby. Without looking up, he addresses her, Mel. Surprised that he noticed her, Mel steps forward, admitting there was no point in trying to hide once the prince had already discovered her. He simply asks how things went. Mel reports that she successfully delivered his message to the intended person, and then asks if it will make a difference. The prince, closing his book, responds that he doesn't know. The scene shifts to Alice, who is investigating the village of Loana. She recalls the king's words about the village struggling even to afford bread, though curiously, that detail no longer appears in the kingdom's records. Alice muses that a true villain wouldn't rely on secondhand information, so she decides to investigate the village in person. Knowing she wouldn't be allowed to leave easily, she devises a clever plan. She'll go in disguise. Determined, Alice sets off on her journey. Though the sounds of the forest unsettle her, she steels herself, reminding herself that she is a villain and mustn't be afraid of mere noises. As Alice approaches Loana, she remembers that a magical barrier surrounds the village, designed to keep criminals from escaping. She isn't certain her own magic will allow her to cross it. Upon entering the village, she's overwhelmed by the foul stench and the terrible living conditions. She even notices people sleeping in the streets, homeless. Alice realizes that if the villagers discovered she was a noble, they might turn on her. Just as this thought crosses her mind, a man taps her on the shoulder, immediately putting her on edge. The man asks her to put away her sword, explaining that it could cause unnecessary trouble since she is clearly not from around there. After confirming she's a stranger, he asks her to follow him. The man leads Alice to a small house, where he introduces himself as Will. Without hesitation, Will addresses her as noble, surprising Alice. He hadn't mentioned it before. She starts to apologize, but Will isn't concerned. He explains that even though he is blind, he can perceive many things through sound. For example, he could tell from the way her footsteps fell unevenly that she was carrying a sword, and from the rustle of her clothing, he knew she was a woman. Her scent, clean and fresh compared to the villagers, told him she was from outside the village. Will then deduces that if she came from outside, she must be an aristocrat with magic. He adds that, in his sighted days, he was surrounded by people like her, so her presence doesn't surprise him. Will reveals that he once worked at the castle, but was exiled to Loana after offending a superior, which cost him his sight. He continues, speaking about how traditions shouldn't constrain the present and how history should be studied to improve the current world. However, he points out, learning from books means nothing if it isn't applied in real life. Alice, moved by Will's wisdom, can't believe such a remarkable man was exiled. She asks if he holds any hatred toward the nobility. Will admits that he would be lying if he said he didn't, but he remains hopeful that one day someone will understand his actions. Shifting the focus back to Alice, Will asks her what she's doing in such a dangerous place. Alice opens up to him, sharing everything, including her dream of becoming a villain. Will listens intently, never judging her, treating her with respect throughout their conversation. Afterward, Alice bids farewell to Will, promising to return, but Will urges her not to. It's too dangerous. Yet Alice isn't deterred. She feels it would be a waste to leave things as they are, believing that men like Will are hard to find. A year passes after this encounter. Alice notes that over the past 2 years, she has spent her time reading constantly, learning swordsmanship, and visiting Will often. But now, things are about to change. Her brother Albert's birthday is approaching, and he will soon enter the Magic Academy, the setting of the events from the game Alice knows. She's also aware that Duke and the heroine have likely met by now, and might even be drawn to each other. With that in mind, Alice feels an urgent desire to embrace her role as the villain and face them head-on. Eric suddenly appears, inviting Alicia to join him for a trip to the city. However, his brother Henry quickly intervenes, insisting that they can't go alone. Eric then asks about their other brother, Alan, but Henry informs him that Alan is busy studying. So, it's decided that the three of them, Eric, Henry, and Alicia, will head to the city together. Their first stop is a shop owned by one of Eric's friends. The shopkeeper introduces himself to Alicia as Paul, the plant seller. Paul shares that his family specializes in green magic, and that he is a noble, though of a lower rank. He enthusiastically talks about the wonders of plants, explaining how they can cure illnesses and heal the soul. Paul grew up surrounded by plants, which made it easy for him to study them, and his goal is to use his knowledge to help others. During their conversation, Alicia briefly explains the uses of amaranth, which catches Paul off guard. He's impressed and asks if she's particularly fond of plants. Alicia, trying to maintain her villainous facade, dismisses his compliment, saying that her knowledge is something everyone should know and that those who don't must not have studied enough. Paul is taken aback by her response, realizing that he just sounded like a proper villain, as Alicia would never openly admit to reading so many books. He mentally notes that he should keep studying how a true villain behaves. Paul, shifting the tone, jokes with Eric, teasing him that if he's not careful, he might find himself with many rivals for Alicia's attention. This comment makes Henry a bit jealous, and he quickly declares that he won't allow anyone to date his sister. Back at the castle, Albert asks Alicia about their day out. Alicia responds that she had fun, while Duke watches Eric closely, aware that he spent time with Alicia. Meanwhile, Curtis playfully asks Alicia to go out with him next time and inquires if there's anywhere she'd like to visit or something she'd like to do. Alicia tells him she'd like to take a fencing test to gauge how much she has improved, expressing her frustration that her father and brothers keep discouraging her from the idea. Albert reminds her that she's only 10 years old and, on top of that, a girl. Alicia counters by pointing out that both he and their other two brothers had taken the fencing test when they were were her age. Albert, however, firmly refuses, telling her that no means no, which leaves Alicia seething with anger. When he tries to approach her, she pushes him away, declaring that she won't give up before storming off. Inside, Alicia feels pleased with herself, knowing that her behavior just now was perfectly villainous. Determined, Alicia steels herself to confront her father and brother, who continue to argue about not letting her take the test. When she finally reaches them, her father convinces her to wait until she turns 15 to bring up the subject again. Reluctantly, Alicia agrees and leaves, though clearly dissatisfied. Once she's gone, Albert speaks privately with their father, and it becomes clear why they're so hesitant. They both know that Alicia is a better swordsman than any boy her age. Allowing her to take the exam would likely draw significant attention, for better or worse. Albert shares a curious concern with his father. It's very likely that the 5 great families are already aware of what's happening, and he's unsure how much longer they can keep things hidden. Still, he hopes that as long as Alicia remains a child, she can lead a normal life. In her room, Alice grows frustrated with being treated like a child. Although she is only 10 years old, she tells herself that she cannot afford to waste any more time. Her goal is to become the greatest villain in history, so she decides to visit Will, hoping he might help her understand what she's feeling. When Alice arrives at Lawana during the day, she sees the town's true face, as she had only visited it at night before. Violence runs rampant among the people, and even children are not spared from the brutality. Shocked, Alice almost intervenes, but Will arrives just in time to stop her, knowing that she wouldn't be able to do anything in her current state. After all, she's still a child. Later, back at the cabin, Will tends to an injured boy, though he doubts the boy will survive as he doesn't seem strong enough. Will explains that such tragedies are common in Lawana. He gathers children together to teach them how to read and do basic math, but the boy is special, an orphan but remarkably intelligent. Even at 6 years old, he would impress someone as old as Will. With proper education, Will believes the boy could become a great man. However, the town's children are viewed as lifelong criminals, and Will admits that no matter how much he despises it, there's little he can do to change that. He tells Alice not to blame herself for what happens in Lawana. Reflecting on her privileged position, Alice feels torn. She knows a villain wouldn't care about helping others, but she feels an urge to do something. Comparing herself to the heroine, who would have acted to save the children, she feels frustrated by her inability to intervene. Without hesitation, she decides to seek Paul's help. Alice asks Paul for some amaranth. Concerned, Paul inquires if someone is sick or hurt, but he doesn't press her when Alice hesitates to explain. Without asking further questions, Paul gives her the amaranth, along with instructions on how to use it. He refuses to let her pay, simply asking her to continue visiting his shop. Back in Lawana, Alice delivers the medicine to Will. Though it won't heal the boy's wounds, it will keep him alive for the time being. Will thanks her, but Alice confesses that she feels helpless. She had been so focused on becoming a villain, but none of that matters if she can't act when the time comes. From now on, she resolves to study harder and dedicate herself fully to becoming a villain who will leave her mark on history. The next day, determined, Alice begins her search for a grimoire. She believes that mastering magic is the key to becoming a formidable villain. As if by fate, a hidden section of the library appears, filled with magic books. Alice is astonished. Now she truly has the chance to achieve her goal. After studying numerous books, Alice learns that magic is divided into levels. Spells from level 50 onwards require the mana of the 5 great families, and the highest recorded magic level is 100. Alice recalls that, at some point in the game, Prince Duke and the heroine surpass that level. Even though a villain might be destined to be weaker than the heroine, Alice resolves to do her best regardless. She starts by practicing level 1 magic, which involves levitating objects. After a few attempts, she successfully levitates a small book. Encouraged, she moves on to level 5 magic, allowing her to move entire books. However, she starts to feel tired and decides to rest for 5 minutes. Just then, Alice hears her father calling her name. To her surprise, it seems the king has come to visit her. In her mind, Alice sees this as a test, a trial for a villain. During the carriage ride, the Duke asks the king why he wants to see Alice. The king explains that he hasn't heard much from her lately and wants to know what she's been up to. Once they arrive, Alice finds herself before the leaders of the 5 great families, and she wonders if her villainous reputation has already reached them. The king gets straight to the point, asking Alice what she thinks of the kingdom. Specifically, how it operates. Thinking like a true villain, Alice bluntly replies that she despises the preferential treatment given to nobles, noting that the most incompetent individuals rule simply because of their noble status. Some of the leaders are visibly offended, but they allow her to continue. Alice adds that this doesn't apply to all nobles. It only takes mana to be considered powerful, but mana and political skill are entirely different. No matter how talented a commoner is, they will never be given a chance. It's absurd how much potential is wasted under this system, she says, and it gives her a headache. The king then asks one final question. If she despises the system so much, does it bother her to belong to one of the 5 great families? True to her role, Alice replies that being born into her family was purely by chance, and to cling to such status while more talented people are left behind would be vulgar. As the audience ends, Alice, visibly exhausted, begins to falter. Before she collapses, Duke rushes to catch her. Albert, who is nearby, suggests they take her to her room, but Duke insists on carrying her himself. Once in her room, Alice briefly opens her eyes. Duke, noticing this, rushes to fetch the medicine for her. When she doesn't respond in a desperate act, he takes the medicine and passes it to her through a kiss. Alicia wakes up fully recovered. It is a fact that it was thanks to the prince's medicine. Or maybe not. She mentions that to the prince she is like a sister, so he shouldn't worry about what happened. However, as the villain, she should focus her attention on someone else. As the heroine, this is how she decides to infiltrate the Magic Academy to investigate. Once inside the academy, she realizes that she is lost, and although she would like to ask someone for directions, they will likely kick her out the moment they see her. At that moment, a girl asks her if she is lost. This girl was a commoner named Liz Carther. Hearing this, Alicia does not recognize the last name, and is also surprised that a commoner has entered the magic school. She quickly concludes that this girl is the heroine, as in the game she has no name or appearance. Alicia introduces herself, and Liz quickly asks her where she wants to go. After mentioning that she was heading to the academy building, Liz quickly takes her hand to guide her there. Alicia thinks Liz is a bit forward, so maybe she should tell her to be more aware of her status. Then again, she might not be able to, since Liz entered the academy on a scholarship and on her own merits, and she's very likely to be treated poorly because of her status. Before long, a group of students greet Liz, and when she mentions that she found a lost girl and tries to introduce her, she notices that Alicia is no longer there. Alicia had managed to hide herself. Alicia comments that she's a terrible villain because she now owes the heroine a favor. Just then, Prince Duke walks by. Liz approaches him to tell him about the girl she found, while the other girls admire Duke and Liz, even thinking that they make a beautiful couple. Alicia, who watches from afar, comments that if everything goes like in the game, the two will end up together, so it makes sense that they're such good friends. She quickly disappears from the scene. It's now time for class, so Alicia will use this moment to investigate the academy. She arrives at the library and is shocked by the number of magic books. There, she notices a small sign posted on the board. Elsewhere, a group of students are talking about a girl who is in the documentation room. Apparently, she is solving the weekly problem posted on the board. One of the girls emphasizes that these problems are very difficult. This week's problem is, explain how you would bring Laval under the jurisdiction of the country. They mention that if she can solve it, she is likely the daughter of an aristocrat. Alicia replies that she would use Duran's financial collapse to isolate Laval. Once Laval is in ruins, she would intend to help them and take advantage of their vulnerability. After finishing, Alicia thinks that that is indeed the answer of a true villain. At that moment, when she turns around, she notices everyone staring at her, including Albert, who quickly reprimands her. Back at the palace, Alicia, while telling herself that her brother had no business yelling at her like that, overhears a conversation between her father and Joan. They were talking about a divergent. Alicia, who was listening from the other side of the door, accidentally bursts into the room. Joan immediately suggests erasing her memory since they are not sure how much she heard, but Alicia cleverly shifts the focus to Liz, making them believe that she thought the conversation was about Liz. Thus, Alicia promises not to say anything and quickly leaves the room, now knowing that the 5 great families have their eyes on her and that she will have to be more careful. Alicia is now in another room practicing dark magic. She mentions that she can already master it up to level 10. However, she was hoping to learn a spell to purify Loana's water, but said spell can only be learned at level 25. Just then, Albert appears at the door and tells Alicia that he has a visitor. It was Liz. Seeing how excited Liz is to meet Alicia, Albert can't help but ask her if they've met before. Liz nods with a smile and explains that she was the one who helped Alicia find her way around the academy the other day, just as he had helped her during the ceremony. Then, in a playful tone, she adds that maybe this is all a matter of fate. However, A skeptical Alicia thinks that Liz is just taking the opportunity to flirt with her brother. Alicia arrives where Albert and the others are gathered. Apparently, they were planning what to do for the school festival, so they asked Alicia for help, thinking she might have an idea since it's even a public event. Alicia immediately remembers that on this day in the game, Liz and Duke become very close friends. She knows that as a villain, she can't just sit back and do nothing, and thinks that she should probably cause trouble for Liz. At first, she thinks that humiliating her for her social status would be a good idea, but eventually she dismisses that option. Maybe she should tell him that she, not Liz, is the perfect match for Prince Duke, though that might seem like she's declaring herself to the prince. Seeing her think so much, Liz finds it adorable, assuming she's trying really hard. However, Alicia thinks she's making a good impression on Liz and needs to do something about it. She suggests that since Liz can use all the magic items, she should do a demonstration in front of the audience on stage. Alicia thinks that with this plan, Liz will hate using her powers in front of a crowd. However, it's quite the opposite. Liz thinks it's a wonderful idea, and not just for her. Everyone else likes the idea too. Clearly, Alicia's plan failed. Liz quickly invites Alicia to join her in the performance. Alicia replies that she can't, as she doesn't study at that academy, though in reality, she just didn't want to participate. Still, Liz insists on the plan, mentioning that they'll find a way. However, Alicia firmly tells her that she would never share the stage with her, not in a million years, which causes a brief silence in the room. Albert comments that she didn't need to be so extreme in saying it. Liz, for her part, asks if she did something that upset her. Alicia replies that not everyone gets along with each other, and that they are not required to be friends. This doesn't seem to bother Liz much, as she says that it's fine, that they will eventually become friends as they talk more. Albert also agrees that the two should talk more. In the end, Alicia reluctantly agrees, though she still refuses to go on stage with her. Thus, the two would end up spending over 10 hours talking, though most of the time was Liz asking Alicia random questions. Exhausted, Alicia wonders if Liz had any more interesting questions to ask her. Suddenly, Liz asks her what Alicia likes to do. Just then, Alicia uses magic, leaving everyone completely shocked, as they didn't expect her to be able to use magic at such a young age. One of them mutters the word divergent. As a result, Albert sends Alicia to her room and asks the others to leave for now. Seeing what happened, Alicia realizes that Joan and her father weren't really talking about Liz the other time. Liz, for her part, simply thanks him and tells him that her brother will take care of everything. Alicia is now with Will. She tells him what happened, and he tells her that it's not normal for someone 10 years old to be able to use magic. Usually it's not possible until around 13 years old. Will mentions that he once met a girl as young as Alicia, who could use magic. Everyone said she was talented. She reached level 80. However, she once tried to use level 100 magic, and as a result, she lost control of her mana, and could never use magic again. Will advises Alicia to learn magic in order, step by step. At that moment, young Jill wakes up. Will tries to introduce Alicia to the boy, but Jill seems a little distant. Will asks Alicia to forgive him, explaining that the boy has been through a lot. Alicia doesn't seem to care much. She just thinks about what Liz Carter would do in that situation. Surely the boy would be more approachable with her, but all this makes her wonder if the heroine can do things that she can't, even though she's supposed to be the greatest villain in history. With great determination, she approaches young Jill and tells him that maybe he shouldn't cling to life anymore, since as long as he lives, he won't be able to avoid contact with others. And does he really think he can escape from what he's afraid of? If that's the case, it would have been better if he hadn't taken the medicine and just perished. Jill quickly defends himself, saying that an aristocrat could never understand what he's feeling. Alicia replies that she does indeed understand what he's feeling, since they both grew up in different worlds. But still, giving him the medicine was her responsibility. However, if he's really not sure he wants to stay alive, she'll finish him off. Terrified, the boy throws a pillow at Alicia and tells her that he won't let her end his life. This answer seems to be exactly what Alicia was looking for. She tells him that she will make sure he stays alive because as long as he remembers what he just felt, she will help him. Jill doesn't quite understand the situation. Alicia tells him not to be confused as she intends to use him. She had heard that he was very smart, so maybe he would be very useful to her, as she is a villain after all. Will turns to the boy and tells him not to pay too much attention to Alicia. Although she is a little odd, she is a good person, deep down. Jill then stands up and tells Alicia that being a noble is very different from how he imagined it. He has decided to accept her help, assuring her that she will be an excellent tool, and he doesn't want anyone to think that he is ungrateful. Seeing him, Alicia just says that he looks really cute when he smiles. The next day, we see the heads of the 5 families discussing the matter of the divergence. Alicia's father mentions that maybe she is the saint, but they quickly contradict him when they say that the saint is Liz Carther, as no commoner had been able to control all the magical elements. However, Alicia is also exceptional in using magic at just 10 years old, but since she is from a noble family, it is not that unusual. In Liz Carther's case, only the one who makes the golden rose bloom can be the saint who will bear the burden of the entire kingdom. So, they ask Joan and Arnold to keep an eye on Alicia, as she is a child with magic, and at that age, she is at risk of losing control of her power. Elsewhere, Alicia and Albert are having a conversation. Albert tells her that Liz has been practicing what she suggested, but failed, and as a result, she lost control of her mana. However, he believes that it was nothing serious, and the teachers who were present helped her immediately. Alicia is glad, as in the end, she needs Liz to be her enemy. Albert then asks her if she didn't know this would happen. However, Alicia answers no, that she plans to defeat her fairly. After that, we see Alicia demonstrating her magic skills in front of Joan and her father. Her father tells her that the king has authorized to speed up the process for her to enter the Magic Academy, allowing her to enroll at 13 years old. So, after all this, Alicia continues to train and prepare, and so, 3 years pass. Now we see a 13-year-old Alicia, a little older. She presents herself before the king, as it seems that they had not seen each other during those 3 years. Joan mentions to the king that during that time, she never lost control of her mana. The king then asks Alicia what level of magic she is at now. Alicia replies that she is level 80. The king, completely surprised, says that this is more than he expected. However, as promised, he will approve Alicia's admission to the Magic Academy, but not before asking her for a favor, to serve as Liz Carther's watchful eye.